Hi YouTube, we're back with the UMX timber here. We've been adding this tail light. That's a white light. And we need to reattach the tail. For whatever reason the rudder tape broke. I don't know if that was why we were working on it or if it broke during flight and I just didn't realize it. And we were just leaving off. We had just unplugged this cable, which goes in and powers our controller module. I don't think I can get the angle for you guys. And that controller module, of course, is what gives us our power for our lighting. That controller module. So we'll just pull this lead gently. Okay, it looks like we're tangled underneath another cable. And of course we're tangled actually under these two, the ones that I added. And what I want to try to do is see if there's a way to untangle it without causing lots of grief for ourselves. Looks like it's probably going to come down about the same way no matter what we do. So we'll leave it where it is for now. When you have a limited amount of cable length to work with, it sure does make it challenging. So, if you remember, we just taped this thing back here with the resistor. A little bit of masking tape to hold that in position. The other piece of tape is just to keep from marring the finish on the airplane. Oops. I'm sure that worked fine. So now my next objective is to establish approximately how long we want this cable to be. And I just as soon have it long enough to make this fairly easy to do. As easy as I can maintain it being. I think I'm going to take this piece of tape off the side here and just hold down the wire that I'm not working with right now, which is going to be our positive lead. And then periodically I just need to double check that I'm not getting tangled up on my other wires in there. So far so good. Okay, so this is a very challenging part, but because there's only two wires, we should be able to fairly easily untwist so we can get our strippers in there and open up that cable. Now if there were three wires, then they'd be braided potentially, and braided wires are harder to undo. Keep in mind, whatever you unbraid here, once you're done you probably want to let it relax back to the twisted or braided configuration. And you'll notice I made a mark. I made a red mark and I made a red mark back there on the actual board where it plugs in so that there's less ambiguity when we get to that point. I saw that as being a potential for conflict, so I took care of that right after I stopped the video last time. Okay, so I'm going to come in here with my strippers and just take a little bite of the cable, and you just got to be delicate. This stuff is so small. Okay. And I don't even think these strippers are going to be small enough to effectively strip that wire, so I've got some smaller strippers here. Yeah, I think these ones will go down a little bit smaller. If not, then I've got another trick up my sleeve. Yeah, it feels like maybe we're not getting a bite on that cable at all. Okay, so there's obviously more than one way to skin that cat. I also have these things, which are like infinitely adjustable. And so all I have to do is just take a flat-bladed screwdriver and adjust them out to the end of this slide. You could also just use a knife, but my experience has been, now you don't want to cut that much. You can kind of set that, you just kind of turn it until you see the opening open. The amount that you expect your cable to be. And just twist this tight. Yep, that ought to do it. Now you'll notice this head is fairly thick, so you have to be careful not to get a tool that's too huge, because you'll have a heck of a time getting it around some of these tight jobs. Okay, so we've exposed just a little teeny bit of that wire, and we want to do as little as possible and still get the job done. And then I want to take the red wire, which ironically I went to the red wire first. I don't know why I did that, because I had taped up the red wire, but that's fine. I'll go ahead and let go of that. Take the negative wire. That one's the one that's going to go in the other position. Let's stick this plane back in the stand so it stops rolling away and moving. These landing gear are making it kind of not work as good as some of the other, see, some of the other planes aren't quite as challenging. Okay, so I've got a little bit of extra cable here. Now, one thought I've got before I go ahead and solder this on is I am going to reluctantly, very reluctantly, twist these wires together. And that's just so that if there is a tangly mess, I want it to be a tangly mess through the length of this wire and not just a tangly mess with the other wires. I want these two to remain tangled together. Does that make sense, guys? And if I would have thought of that before I soldered this on, I could put it in a drill press, or not a drill press, I'd put it in the, like a regular drill and just spin it. That works really sharp. And this is such small stuff, so it's a little bit tricky to get it to twist. But what the objective there is that that'll kind of keep this as one contiguous unit as it goes back. The other thing you can do is you can solder it on the end together. Obviously you're not going to short circuit it because it's not hooked to anything yet. Okay, so that should be good enough for what we're doing. And then we just need to undo the first couple of twists to free up the two wires. Hopefully I don't have to do like 10 twists. That seems counterintuitive right now because of the nature of the real estate in here, but believe me, it's a good idea. Try it sometime. Okay, so now I'm going to take this individual cable, rather than being like a stranded cable, and what I want to do is I want to somehow try to pierce the group of cables here. Trying to get it to focus for us. Okay. And if that doesn't work, that's going to be extremely difficult. So I'm just going to take some pliers. I realize I'm out of focus. I'll come back into focus when I come back to the workpiece. I'm going to actually make my little bend fold in this first, and then I'm going to wrap this around in a different than originally anticipated method. Okay, so now I should be able to solder that, but I kind of want it to be in the position that I want it to be at the end so that it stays in that position, which is kind of going along the length of the wire, because once you get this soldered, it's going to want to stay kind of in that position. Okay, soldering iron's nice and toasty. Shouldn't even really need to apply solder, just touch it with a puddle of solder and it will take care of it. You kind of got to take care of that just about every time when you got a crappy tip like this. Okay, so that's hot now. So you just want to try to keep it from touching the foam if you can. Okay, so that should be, but it's not. Okay, so it didn't make a decent contact. That's fine. We're going to fix that right now. I just need a little something to protect the foam from the heat of this solder. And yeah, I know that's a piece of tape, but it's enough to do what we're going to need to protect it from. So we'll get a little bit more of this. I guess I am going to apply solder. I said I wouldn't probably need to, but I guess I do. Okay, so here in a minute, we'll have to evaluate if we're going to have enough strength there, or if I need to add some more solder, and then we have to protect that with something, so we'll probably use a little drip of CA. But in the meantime, I have to probably go ahead and do the inevitable, which is shorten this. Okay, this is our negative wire. We don't need a ton of it, so I'm just going to cut the leads off, most of the leads, and that's going to leave us with this little bit that needs to be doubled back in a hook shape. And we can just kind of put the hook over the work and squash it down a little bit. Okay, right now what I'm trying to do is just get a little friction on there so I can grab back where I twisted this, and then I can just spin it. And that'll give me a nice little spot to get a little bit of solder going. Okay. And this is where you kind of pay the price for using a solid core product for your wire, because it's, you know, there's not multiple strands to deal with. So now we have to melt off the varnish and put a little bit of solder there. And just making sure that our solder is nice and tidy. Don't get it overheated or you'll short it out back there. Okay, so now that it's nice and amazingly cool to the touch again, we can go ahead and make our loop for the other side. Now this time we'll leave the loop opened, better opened, because we're going to wrap it around the negative wire. And we're going to tap power from this little connector. Okay, so same strippers we used before. Just a little bit of bite. Oh, son of a gun, it broke. Okay, so you'll see that I evidently cut all the way through that wire, which is a bummer, so no soup for you. Now we get to have some more fun. So what's going to happen now is we have to basically take and strip that wire back. Oh, it's going to be more work, but that's fine. It is what it is. And then we have to establish a mechanical connection that's strong enough to be sustained. Okay, so I'm actually going to use a pair of pliers to support the back side of the cable as I come in, and then I can just kind of walk this cable, the sheath off of it. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see that, but that's the sheath. So I just used a pair of side cutters instead of strippers. Now I need to tin that wire that we just exposed. And it looks like I broke the red one too. Awesome. It's all part of the show here, guys. Okay, so now I gotta think for just a second. Probably with this red wire. I'll end up just going ahead and doing that. These little wires are just a bear to work with, so believe me, if you haven't done it yet, you'll do it if you do one of these projects eventually. So now you can also buy and build these little connectors if you're really crazy. That'd be the most professional way to do it. Okay, so now I need to get this wire to pull out somehow so that I can reach it better and have it hold still so that I can solder it quickly. So I think what I'll do is, first of all, I'll take this stupid label off. Like, really, I don't care if it's CE rated. I'm sure some regulator does, but I don't. Okay, so we'll just tape this up here to the ceiling. We've got our red and our black here now available, where we can sort of get to them without tons of effort. And then our red needs to be reattached. At this point we could probably do some heat shrink, but I'm not going to because it's going to just be a pain in the neck. See, and this is always one of these steps like, oh yeah, all you have to do is cut the red wire and the brown wire and solder them together. It's super easy, right? Well, it might be easy to explain what you're doing, but then going and doing it is a little bit more challenging. Easier said than done sort of situation, you know? Okay, so now this resistor needs to go between the brown wires, okay? But this one does need a bit of heat shrink over it. So we'll just go with, got some blue there, looks fine to me. Should be big enough, let's double check. And we're just going to slip it down. Well, that's probably a little bit too long, in fact, but we'll double check here in a minute. Oh, son of a gun, it's too big. Alright, I'm going to get something that'll fit. Okay, so I got this stuff that's a little bit bigger. We'll see if that works. Oh, well, I mean, it'll for sure work. Might just be a little bit too big. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, so now I need to try to keep this apart from one another and solder it all together like this, which is a challenge. It will be a challenge. That's why it's always best to not cut that cable if you can avoid it. Of course, as you can see, I did it. I've done it before. I'll do it again. Gosh dang it. I gotta get that braced somehow. It's just gonna want to slip away repeatedly until I go nuts. And every time I don't have success, it makes the other parts harder. Because that other, the other solder joint will weaken each time. I need to get a little bit more wire exposed on this side, so I'm going to support very carefully the brown wire here, and I'm going to use the actual tool to support my stripping. Okay. Just a little teeny bit of wire exposed. That's all you get in these applications, by the way. Because there's not much more wire to be had. I do not want to get solder on the actual resistor, but I may have to in this application. Okay. See where my problem lies, guys? As soon as I get the one piece soldered, it's going to want to try to unsolder the other piece. So I have to mechanically tie these together. But there's like no room to do it. When I say mechanically tie together, I need to twist them together, guys. So I just put a 90-degree bend on both sides. It's funny how these little UMX planes, they're the smallest, but sometimes, boy, they are the most work by far. And this is for just one light. Gosh, Brian, why do you do this to yourself? Okay, so now I'm running into another problem. That is the stiffness of the cable is fighting me. Okay. Hypothetically, that should work right there. I just need to hurry up and get it soldered before it falls apart. Okay, we got a nice little blob of solder there. Now, at this point, I need to try to bring this heat shrink down. Obviously, it's not going to cover that part. And the next dilemma, I have to figure out a way to shield the heat as I heat the heat shrink. So I'm just going to use this thing here. It's like a little heat sink out of an electrical device. Can't even remember when I got that. Just tearing something apart. You got to be extra careful not to heat up your varnished cable too. Okay. That's probably as good as I'm going to get on this one. So now the positive wire, we are going to coat with some CA. Make sure you're using a foam safe. And then I want this lid ready to drip kicker. Well, we can do both of them, but I gotta start somewhere, so I'll just start with what's in the way first. And just getting a coating over that. We can always add another coat if it's necessary of CA. Okay, so I got just another second coat there. And then I need to do the same on the red wire now. And the flexibility is going to go out the window here in just a second. Okay, so I'd really like to test this first, but I don't think I have that option today. Okay, so now I need to wipe the tip. Very important to get that coated entirely. If you don't get it perfect, then you'll have a spot for a dead short right there. So be careful about that. It's always tricky to get that CA to do what you want it to when it's in a thin work surface like a wire. Okay, so I think I've got them covered, which should significantly increase the strength of each of those joints. Now I need to just take a second and figure out if I'm going to try to tape over them as well. Not sure if I'm going to do that on this application. Remember how I marked the red side? The red side's here. So lucky for me, I can actually manipulate it back there. Yeah, I just think I'm going to have to just leave it free. I just don't think I have the flexibility I'd like. Guys, I recognize how crappy this film is going to be because it's just hard for both of us to see. And let me tell you something, I have to see. I'll give you guys a better shot of this here in a minute when we get it in there though. Okay, I've got that controlled. Okay, now I have to support the bottom of the plane for this step. I'm going to take my... Dang it. I lost it. Okay, so I've got a pretty good hold of it now with these forceps. Ooh, I don't want that there, but I'm going to leave it there for this second. I'll tell you why that's bad here in a minute. Okay, so there's the wire. Son of a gun, it popped out again. That black and red wire needs to not be where it is too, guys. Because that black and red wire right there is going to be next to the gear for like the elevator, I think, on that servo. So we got to be careful. It's not in yet. It's close. Really close. It's in now. Guys, it's plugged in. So now I just need to move this red and black wire over, which evidently is the red and black wire that goes up to the front LEDs. Okay, so let's get this stuff out of the way. Get the cap back on. Okay, so we got our radio on now, and we cleaned up some junk out here. So we're just going to grab and plug this in quick. And there you have it, guys. Looks like our wiring worked. Now it's going to attempt to initiate safe while I'm moving it, so it's probably not going to work so hot. So that's going to definitely help a lot when you're flying in the absolute dark. And that worked really nice. That light looks nice. Okay, so now we need to get the tail reattached, and we need to control this cable a little bit better. So we'll go ahead and unplug this. And we're about out of time, so hopefully don't run out of time here. Okay, so you remember how we had this stiff wire here needs to move out of the way. Okay? Sorry. Guess you guys get to see the spinner for a second. Okay, so that wire is just going to get folded mostly out of the way. And we were talking about how we might have to tape it to keep it out of the way. Well, ironically enough, the inflexibility of it that made it so hard to do, it's kind of helping now, because now it's not as big of an issue because it doesn't need to be tamed quite as much. But you do need to be careful to test your control surfaces to make sure you don't have any contact points. Like right there, I was right next to the rudder or elevator servo. So I'm going to just try to... I mean, you got to remember, this thing's not static. It's not going to sit on a desktop somewhere. Well, I mean, yours might. Mine's going to be flying like crazy. So you need to try to plan for that. Okay, so now all my wire is out of the way of all the servos. Now we can put our little battery holder back in, and we'll get that in and come right back. Okay guys, so there you have it. Extremely bright. Should really help with visibility. You'd be flying above yourself and you'll have 3 points of reference all the time, regardless of what direction. And it's just going to be a lot easier to see. Plus, you'll be lighting up the ground below. So I'm going to go ahead and tape this back together, and that's going to be pretty uneventful. But guys, thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll get you one more really good shot of this. We'll get you a flight video as soon as you can, guys. Come back for more. Check the description below if you want to help support us and buy stuff from the links.